We could do a comedy show. We could produce a comedy show from New York City because it's open down there. So why don't we get Mark Normand and Ryan Long and Rob Mayhew was down at the time. I think Dave Temple and Katie Boyle were also on the show. We had this a pretty stacked lineup,
Yeah.
and we had them all at Brooklyn Comedy Club, and we live streamed it. We had Paco from Gas Digital come in and live stream it for us, and we streamed it into Decentraland, and we had 300 people come to the show in Decentraland.
Welcome back to another episode of Lights Camera Crypto, podcast exploring all things entertainment and Web3. I'm your host, Stephen Ladden, and this week our guest is Tyler Morrison. Tyler is a comedian and co-founder of Decentral Comedy. And in the episode, he takes us through his journey, his comedic journey of becoming a comic, finding his voice, putting in that time, sweat, blood, tears into stand-up comedy, and having that trajectory ultimately lead him to his current position as both a stand-up comic performer and co-founder of Decentral Comedy, which is a company that put on one of the first comedy shows in the Metaverse. So throughout the episode, we again talk more about Tyler's trajectory, but also the future of comedy, what it means to put on a comedy show in the Metaverse, and what that means for the future of comedy as we know it. Tyler, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Really excited to kind of dive into sort of comedy and Web3 and crypto and how those three things, all of those things kind of come together in a really interesting way. Your background is as a comedian. How did you get involved in comedy? Was that something you always wanted to pursue? What was sort of the jump off for you?
Yeah. So I've been doing stand-up comedy for 20 years. I started out when I was 18. I went to college in Toronto. They have this comedy program there called the Humber College Comedy Writing Performance Program. So I went there when I was 18, and it kind of put me in this this vacuum of creative people who were my age, and we were all starting out in stand-up. A lot of us came from small towns. It was a good excuse to move to the city because like your parents are like, oh, at least they're getting like some sort of like college education.
Sure.
Really, it's like you're learning from professionals, but it's a lot of trial and error and just meeting other like-minded funny people. And within like a week of going to that program, I was doing stand-up at the Yuck Yucks Comedy Club in Toronto in front of 300 people for my first time ever performing. And it was just like the wildest experience. It went pretty good, actually. So after that, I was hooked. And then you go and you just bomb at all the open mics.
Wait, your first time was in front of 300 people?
Yes. Yeah. It was
Wow.
a packed comedy club, like the biggest comedy club in Toronto, the biggest comedy chain in Canada at Yuck Yucks. And it was pretty cool. It went well. But then the next time I went up, it was like in like a dive bar, and the crowd was not as excited.
Sure.
Chase the dragon.
Yeah,
Chase
right.
the dragon.
Well, to go from 300 to a less enthused crowd must have been an early experience that you're like, hey, so not every show is like that.
Exactly. You kind of learn how to play to different size crowds and the different timing that you need. Especially back then, I do a lot of kind of set up punchline stuff, so there is that expectation that you need to get a laugh in the laugh, like there's a pause for it, and in the smaller rooms you don't necessarily get that hang time that you would get in a big room. So you have to learn to adjust your timing and react accordingly to what the crowd's doing.
Sure.
So it takes a little bit of time to build that up.
Well, and how different a trajectory, because a lot of times you hear about comics working their way up to a 300 person room,
Mm-hmm.
and that's sort of a milestone. Did it change your perspective or your approach early on, starting in a 300 person room and then having that perspective and then moving forward from there? Or was it just an experience, and then from that,
I
It
think it
was
was just like I understood right away that there's two different, to get to the 300 seats, you have to do these other rooms to become bulletproof. And you can do well in a room full of 300 people and you can kill, but it doesn't mean that you're good yet. And it's just there's an energy and people feed off of it. You can have good jokes, but you might not necessarily be a good performer yet. So that's what took a long time, I think, to iron out. And it takes comedians, a lot of them, about 10 years to really start becoming comfortable in who they are on stage and finding, I hate the term, finding your voice, but it is kind of that the first 10 years you're just trying to become comfortable up there and comfortable in the silence. And if you're comfortable in the silence, then you can kind of control the I guess the tension in the room. And tension, if you use it as your friend, becomes a beautiful thing for big payoffs for jokes. So you can
sure.
build that and control it.
Well, and right, and it becomes just another tool in your toolbox rather than something that you're fighting against, or you know using something that taking that tension energy and having it impact your set negatively.
Exactly, exactly. And if you're doing kind of darker, edgier material too, you cannot show 1 ounce of hesitation or the crowd will not respect you. They won't follow you into those darker territories. And they go there, they want to have they're looking for a leader. And if you're a leader and you show weakness, they won't follow you. So there's that part of it too. And so getting comfortable in the silence, that's a very important thing for any comedian that's kind of wanting to play in that terrain. If they hear your voice crack and you're not confident in like an edgy joke, that you're in trouble. They're gonna back off.
For sure. And you talk about finding your voice, uh, and I know you're like, it sounds a little cliche or cringy, but I
It's
think
true
it's
though.
true. You're true. And how much of that though comes from as a person, as an individual, identifying what's important to you and what your point of view is as a person first, and then translating that to the stage.
See, I think that's like really important. I think that's where I started hitting even harder with my comedy is when I started taking topics that I was talking about and then relating them back to me. So if you're just taking, for example, I had a bit like long time ago about Angelina Jolie adopting all these kids from different countries. And I was basically just roasting Angelina Jolie, which was the jokes in and of themselves were funny, but there was no reason for me to really talk about that. Like I was just making fun of her. But if I could apply that somehow to my life and my relationships and talk about it so that it's relatable to me, then it's going to be relatable more to the audience. And so I was able to do that, and it turned into a really strong bit for me that did really well. I think it went fairly viral at one point. But it's taking those. If you can take any topic and look at it from within, and then talk about it from your perspective, it really does um, connect with audiences more.
So essentially, the more personal the material, obviously, the more it relates. Uh,
Definitely.
and with that though, too, I think the more personal it can be, it sounds like with time and certainly, you mentioned the 10-year mark of quote unquote finding your voice. It's like it also gives you time to, I think, lean into the topics that you want to lean into and feel confident in that. Whereas perhaps starting out, you're just trying to get a laugh. And so is it,
Yes.
the evolution then becomes, all right, hey, I know I can make people laugh, but how do I merge that with what do I want to say as a person?
Exactly. The first stages in for a comic is really just being able to prove to yourself that you can get a laugh, you can survive for however long on stage, and then you start building it out to okay, I can do well for 20 minutes now. Now let's try and do 30, and you really find out how much of your material is actually good when you're in the deep waters doing 30, 40 minutes and then to an hour. And if you're a good comedian or you're paying attention and trying to really put these puzzle pieces together, you're gonna work backwards and figure out where there's gaps in your act, and you'll get stronger, and you'll build upon your weaknesses. It's the people that are a little bit delusional and don't want to admit that not there yet. That they stay shitty forever. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on the show, but
Totally. Hey, there's no parental rating, but there's also freedom of speech. So
yeah.
no censors. Uh, to that end, then, was there a moment or an experience along your path where you felt, okay, hey, I've started to come into my own. I'm getting not just laughs for the sake of, all right, hey, I can get a laugh, but now I'm merging what we were just talking about. I'm merging
hmm
the internal voice, what I'm trying to say, with getting laughs, and now I'm kind of,
Yeah.
rolling all cylinders.
I
Excuse me.
think I always kind of did that. And I had that out of the gate. That wasn't even the problem for me. The problem for me was just being comfortable on stage. And I didn't realize maybe I'm nervous, but I'm doing things that are like, I'm not comfortable up there yet. And that took a while to understand. And then uh, the delivery, if it was too mechanical. I'm more like my X factor would be kind of like my writing. Some people, their X factor is, they're a great performer, but they can't write a joke to save their life. And then the opposite for me was that I'm just like a really good writer, but I wasn't a great performer yet. So once I got comfortable with, more stage time really is what all it took. But once I got more comfortable with that, then my persona just kind of built into what it is now. If you look at clips from my first, I had video of my first album, but I put it out as an audio album, but the video is there too. And if you watch that, I'm doing like all the jokes and material are pretty strong and structured, and they're hitting hard in front of like a good crowd. And it's just that I don't have my persona there. It's almost like when Chris Rock runs his material, he does the material without the kind of the preacher delivery when he's working on it in the rooms, in the mics, because if it's killing without that extra style to it, then he knows it's going to really kill when he puts his performance to it. And so I was just kind of missing the performance. And once I was able to merge both those things, I started noticing a big increase in what I was able to do on stage, and just seeing more momentum come towards me in the business.
So in some ways, it's like you became more aligned with yourself, and then from that alignment,
hmm
the other things that were meant to come started to come.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I learned it from roasting, because I do lots of roasts, and I've been on a bunch of like celebrity roasts and roast battles and stuff. But when I was doing these roasts, I would go in with a different type of confidence than what I would have in stand up. Even just like another level of I don't give a fuck. And that's the most important thing for a comic, to have that swagger. If that's the type of material that you're doing, if you can have that, kind of coincide with the material. And so when I go on these roasts, I'd be like the most unknown guy on the roast, but the producers knew that I could do this. And so they put me in these positions where, I'm on a roast with Gilbert Gottfried. I'm like, all these guys, uh, Tony Hinchcliffe, and those dudes are all on the roast. And I'm this unknown guy, but I go in and I'd act like I'm the biggest bully on the block, and I just bitch slap everyone. That's just, but I wasn't doing that in stand up with the same confidence. But like I'm like, if I could be as kind of like cold blooded as I am on these roasts into the stand up, and just take kind of that attitude and persona and project it more onto what I'm doing. The material has the attitude, but if I can perform it the way that I'm performing it on the roast, it's going to have an effect on the crowd. And it really, once I was able to merge what I was doing with the roast with the stand up, it started kicking things up a notch.
Awesome. So again, getting back to kind of merging the so I guess it sounds like your roast confidence started to be at the same level of your as your stand-up confidence, and that was sort of
Yeah,
the tipping point for you.
yeah, exactly. And the roast conference was there first, and then the stand up caught up, and now it's everything's kind of running nicely together.
Right on. And was there a moment or experience along this path that we're talking about where suddenly stand up became started to become your vocation? Like it started to become not only just an outlet, not only just an art, but it started to provide for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've kind of been able to. have success on the producing side of stand up as well. Even before I was having a lot of success as a performer, I create a comedy festival where I live, which is like 2 hours north of Toronto, and so we've had this big comedy festival up here where all these comics would bring them in from all over, and we've had some great comics come through over the years. But through the business side of it, I was able to have some like comedy success in terms. I guess it would be like financially, I was able to do well. Like I could live off of comedy, and then once my stand up started kicking in, now it's like I'm that's more my main focus.
Right on, right on.
Hmm.
And did you have aspirations to? You mentioned the show in Toronto to create your own shows in addition to getting up and doing spots, or was that sort of a mutual? Were those mutually exclusive goals, or was it all sort of feeding the beast?
Early on, I think I I came out of an environment in Toronto at the time, and it might have just been like comedy at the time. There wasn't a lot of like older comics that wanted to help you out. It wasn't as big of a pat on the back festival as it is now. There's a lot of guys and girls that bring up the people under them and help, help people on the way up. That wasn't really happening when I was starting. So I just was like, I'm just gonna do this myself. And I know how to, I have the drive, the business side of it. So I can produce my own shows. I can produce, my own festival. I can do everything, and I don't have to really rely on anybody. And so that was kind of like a good thing for me, I think, because I learned how to do all these skills that now are even more applicable. I mean, just being able to edit video and content and stuff like that. Like I learned that for the festival, but now everyone has to do that, and that just kind of gives you a leg up knowing how to do all these things. I can design my own posters and don't have to, you know, call in people to do them or pay people to do them.
For sure.
It's having an industrial spirit, I guess,
Yeah,
helped
yeah.
out in the long run. Yeah.
Multi hyphenate on the business side of things. Okay, and so then you've produced shows, you've had success there. You've obviously had a tremendous success as a comic as well. Uh, purely for your own stage time. How then does the idea or the foray into uh, decentral comedy come about?
Okay, so this is decentral comedy is one of the most interesting things I've ever been involved in, and it's something I never thought I'd be involved in. This type of thing. I don't consider myself super tech savvy. I'm not a gamer. I don't get in. I didn't really get into any of that stuff before. But I live where I live is I was saying it's like 2 hours north of Toronto. And when I moved up here fairly early in my career, so I wasn't doing open mics all the time. I kind of had to really bridge the gap between my distance in major cities by using the internet and understanding like, okay, I'm not in a major city right now, but I can get a bunch of jokes off and people will see how funny I am on Twitter, Facebook, using all that. And so this is kind of an extension of that, where when the pandemic happened, there's not much you can do. There's all these Zoom shows happening. And I mean, podcasts, I think Zoom is great for. I didn't find the stand-up Zoom shows were really my thing. I didn't enjoy that. Some comedians really they didn't mind it at all, but it just wasn't my style, especially with the setup punch stuff. It's much better for storytelling, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but in the kind of the tail end of the pandemic, Canada and Ontario, we were locked down longer than in the U.S. and these things it felt like it was going on forever. And I'm like, we got to figure out a different way that we can do something cool that isn't the same as these Zoom shows. I know, like, I did the one they did a coast to coast roast. It was the guys from Helium Comedy Club, super cool guys. Mark Grossman and those guys put it together, and
Yeah,
they had
yeah.
like Joe List and Mark Norman hosted it, and so my friend Rob Mayhew and I were repping Toronto, and we were going against all these comedians, and that was fun, and that was like probably the one good Zoom experience that I had, and then. But I'm like, okay, we can do something more. And a friend of mine, her name's Jade Seebeck. She found out about Decentraland, and she's like, one of her friends told her about it, And so she starts explaining what it is, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. We should check this out. So we start looking into it. I'm like, well, we could do a comedy show. We could produce a comedy show from New York City because it's open down there. So why don't we get Mark Normand and Ryan Long and Rob Mayhew was down at the time. I think Dave Temple and Katie Boyle were also on the show. We had this a pretty stacked lineup,
Yeah.
and we had them all at Brooklyn Comedy Club, and we live streamed it. We had Paco from Gas Digital come in and live stream it for us, and we streamed it into Decentraland, and we had 300 people come to the show in Decentraland. It was a free show, and we're just testing it out, right? This is like
Yeah.
a first run of how do we do this as a new thing, and people seem to really like it. And I mean, the comics were great. I mean, it's pretty awesome when you can get that caliber of comedian all together in one show. And in New
Totally.
York, you get that all the time because it is like the mecca. But so we were able to put this on, and it worked. And so we're like, okay, well, what else can we do? And then it just became this kind of trial and error thing. We're developing this new brand of comedy, but what I realize is, as a comedy fan also, I went to the show as my avatar to watch it, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like the people from our team who are helping out, they're at the show too, and you see them. I'm like, this is kind of neat, right? Like if you're in different cities, you can kind of get together with your friends and watch this event, and it's just different. And how many people get a chance to see a New York comedy show live? There's so many people from different parts of the world. They may never get to New York City, but they could come into Decentraland for free and watch this show. And so I thought there was something awesome about that. And so we kept testing it out. And we have a friend of ours, his name's Patrick. He came to us with he has a comedy club that he created, and we teamed up, and we had formed the first comedy club in Decentraland called Decentral Comedy Club. And so we have this comedy club. We started putting some shows on in there, and we decided the best move for us would be to do a comedy festival. And we did the first ever comedy festival in the Metaverse, which is called Mic Drop. Now, Mic Drop, we had a variety of different shows. So we had some podcasts, we had some stand-up specials that we screened. Most of it was streaming, and because Decentraland, it's the sound isn't spatial yet. So like when you have spatial sound, it'll be a lot better for the avatars to be able to perform as an avatar. But
Sure.
for now, is the streaming was the way to do it. So we did a live stream from where is it? St. Mark's Comedy Club in New York City. So we had a bunch of great comics doing that, and then we had Gilbert Gottfried came in and did a set list. So he was on a Zoom, and they're feeding him the topics, and Gilbert Gottfried was just free flowing, unbelievably funny. It was the second last show that he did before he passed away, which is
Oh,
like
wow.
wild. Yeah, like he might still be stuck in the metaverse. I don't know. Gilbert never escaped.
Right. That's
And
where
then
that's actually he never passed. He just
yeah,
transitioned onto a different environment.
yeah, exactly. So it was. I mean, what a great comic, and just he's a nice guy. I got to work with him in the real world too, which is cool. I got to do that roast with him, and got to take him to a couple shows where I was opening. But yeah, for a guy like that to come in, this is an interesting thing I think for me to be able to bring these other comics in to try this new I guess medium of tech. And so Gilbert came in, and then we had I'm trying to think what else. Oh, Paul Provenza came and did a screening of The Aristocrats, which is cool. And like we did like a whole
Neat.
thing about
Yeah.
like talking about the behind the scenes of the making of the movie. Yeah, Paul Provenza's the man. And so it was just an interesting festival. We want to put a variety of different comedy together, and we got a lot of people. There's 10,000, 15,000 people maybe attended it. And so
Wow.
that was exciting to get that many people out. So then we decided we're going to do another festival, and we did a podcast festival, and we did 96 hours of podcast streaming 24/7, and we had a lot of different podcasts joined up for it. We had Ryan Long's Boys Cast, and Ryan's a good friend of mine from Toronto, and now he's in New York. So we had him in there, and then we had Andrew Schultz's Flagrant. They came and did. We put one of their episodes on in there, and just a whole ton of podcasts, and the same type of turnout. Lots of people coming to check it out. And it's a very exciting thing to be able to integrate this and try and bring. For me, I think it's cool too to bring in these comedians that have a dedicated fan base. Their fans are going to come and check this tech out now. It's a new thing. Like if a comic is doing something new, their fan base is probably going to follow them, or at least try it out to see if they like it. And the ones that
Right.
do will stick. Um, it's certainly it's all very new. We're all in like this. It's the new frontier of all this
Right.
tech that's happening. There's
Yeah.
nothing's perfect yet. There's still going to be glitches. We're still working out bugs and trying to figure out the best user case, or the best, yeah, I guess just the best experience. And there's different ways that certain people are going to like to experience it. I mean, we also stream on our Discord, so they can watch what's happening in Decentraland through our Discord, or they can jump right in. So there's other ways to the people are gonna people love Discord. They love consuming stuff on there too. So and it's just a new. We're just figuring out all the new ways that people can enjoy it and trying to offer multiple avenues for that. I think.
Sure. And just to clarify the understanding here. So you're saying the way in which currently the sound works in Decentraland, it you guys aren't performing, say, as avatars of yourselves. You're streaming the
Yeah,
live performance, and then people in their avatars are showing up, or how does that
that's correct.
got it?
Yeah, so there's a
So
bunch of people show up as their avatars, and so they got all the craziest, like, all the craziest gear. Some people look like dragons, and it's always funny seeing everyone's different avatars and wearables. But yeah, we stream it on the screen in Decentraland. I have gone in as my avatar, and we screened one of my stand up specials, and I went in and did a Q&A with like the comedy fans. So like I would talk on the mic and stuff. I think as that gets better, we're going to be able to do even more cool experiences like that. And I'm hoping that the sound, once the sound evolves, it's going to be really cool too for those type of experiences.
sure. And just to understand it even more, is the when you with your partners and stuff, do you guys own a comedy club in Decentraland, or is this like is that also something that has to is one of the pieces of the puzzle to make this thing get up and running, or
Yeah, we have a
is
comedy club in Decentraland, so we're able to do shows there whenever we want to, which is awesome.
amazing? Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone has a podcast that they are running weekly, they can send me the podcast and I can schedule a time and we can play it. And they can advertise to their fans when it's going to be. We also have the ability to do ticketed events for certain artists that are going to want to have a ticketed thing. Usually, like we've mostly done free events, just because again we're just building the community and we fortunately, with my other company, which is called Cottage Comedy Digital, we have a lot of content that we've produced over the years with different comedians and with our record label. So we're able to work with those comics we're just trying to promote what their products and get their name out there too. So we have like a good library of our own content, but we're able to also bring in new comics and create new experiences. And it just depends kind of on what that comic is looking for out of their metaverse experience. What do they want to provide to their comedy fans? And we're happy to, work with them to kind of create that, unique experience for them.
Awesome. So in many ways, you're becoming more tailored to comics who are also trying to pursue Decentraland, pursue the metaverse as an avenue for their material.
Yeah. Like the way I see it is, I mean, if you're putting your podcast out on YouTube or any of those free platforms, I don't see why you wouldn't simulcast it into the metaverse too and capture another market that's, you know, going to be able to experience it in a different way. And I also think this is where the tech is going. If you're a comic and you start learning about it now, it's going to be a lot easier for you when this becomes adopted in a much more, you know, mainstream sense, to be able to understand how blockchain works and how all this is, where it's going, and be ahead of the curve. That's way better. You always want to be the first comic on a new platform when it blows up, as opposed to being the last guy and then it falls, you just never get your traction there. So I mean,
Well,
I think there are comedians that, they regret not getting in early to certain things, or they just weren't open to it. I think people are learning now to maybe not reject these new ideas, be open to them, especially if it's someone that they know who has, I don't know, experience in their industry, and can be, um that brings value to it.
sure. Well, I think in any industry we're using comedy here as the uh, certain industry of choice, but really change in any lane you could say is difficult for some people to accept or wrap your
Hmm.
head around. So I think from what you're proposing to them with what you're able to offer is a really great opportunity to get immersed in a new sort of lane to put forth the art. And it's
Hmm.
like, it just takes a perhaps a shift in perspective if there's any hesitation or fear or disgruntled feelings, uh, to just jump on board and jump in.
I think so, and I think if they see like someone like myself, who's, just a total hick, if this guy can do it, then maybe it's not that weird. I don't.
Yeah, yeah. If he can do it, then we have hope.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is like, again, I'm not super tech savvy, but because of my experience in doing comedy and producing it, I'm able to understand what the user experience should be, and like, oh, can we do this? And there's like all these brilliant tech minds that are like looking to work with us, and we're kind of like a case study for them to try out
Right.
this new tech, and they never would have done half of the stuff if it wasn't like me just bringing it up, going, oh, are we able to do this? And they're like, oh yeah, we could do that. And then all of a sudden something new is created that's available to everyone to use, and that's how it's evolving. But it's not because I'm like some tech savvy guy. It's just because, I understand what's going to work for the fans and what they're going to want and what the comedians will want. We were able to create a crypto tip jar in Decentraland, so that the fans can tip any of the artists that are on screen, and it
Oh, that's
gets set
great.
up directly
Yeah.
to the comedian's MetaMask wallet, and it gets distributed. And if there's like multiple comedians on the show, it can go to multiple wallets. It's really cool, and we've developed this, and it's, we offer it out to other venues in the metaverse. If they want it, they can contact us and we can get them set up with it, so they can use it in their space. I think it's a good incentive for artists to be able to know that, okay, I can also bring in kind of like crypto. It's like Patreon, or it's like
Yeah.
there is a little bit of incentive there. If it's Especially if it's not a ticketed event, there should be some sort of like tip mechanism.
Totally. And what's neat too is, as you said, sort of using comedy as the case study in this case, it's also paving the way for other lineups of other, musicians and stuff like that to kind of
Hmm.
carve out a niche of support that otherwise wouldn't be there had you guys not been doing what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And in Decentraland, it was very music centric before we kind of came along, and it's still, music is a big thing in there, that people love the EDM, and it's a lot of avatars dancing, and it was nice for us to be able to come in and offer a different form of entertainment, just something different that people could come check out. And we hope people keep coming and checking out the shows, and we're going to keep, you know trying to evolve what we're doing. And as Decentraland is able to grow with, with where they're headed, I mean, the talk is that they're, working on getting it to VR. We're excited about the possibility of where VR is going to take it. The other metaverses, some of them have VR, and it's pretty cool. I mean, I did a show in Horizon Worlds last week for the first time, and that was an exciting way to do comedy in the metaverse, a different way. And not saying one's better than the other. It's just two different ways to consume and perform also and distribute your content. But as the metaverses, there's because there's so many, it's really like this arms race of tech, and we're all going to start seeing them pull from each other and form into hopefully one thing that everyone can access easily. And it's interesting to see, like, how the VR ones work versus the more I guess second lifestyle, um game computer based ones, things things that are good here and maybe not so good, and vice versa. If they can work itself out, I think just naturally that's going to happen.
Right, right. Well, if everybody's aligned too in terms of creating the best experience possible and innovating in this new space, then it would seem that that's sort of the natural trajectory, as you're saying, to kind of have the best type of experience across music, comedy, etc.
Exactly. And I do, a big part of this for me is like these decentralized platforms. Like Decentraland really is, a pretty wide open. It's not like, I mean, it's not owned by Facebook. And I just got a strike on Facebook today because of a Jeffrey Dahmer joke. So I want to be able to create a platform for comedians where they're not getting these type of strikes on their content, where the funniest, edgiest podcasts like Legion of Skanks don't have to bleep out their first 10 minutes of their thing to get their ad revenue. There's just has to be a way to kind of protect a little bit of that. I mean, if you look at the big platforms and some of the stuff that they've been doing for with censorship, and it's getting out of control. Is really It really has become so restrictive, and I think that this is a great opportunity for comedians to have input on the ground level and the infrastructure and how it's built, and to have a mind for what the future is for our content and how comedians can control their own content, what they put out, but also have it protected, so that it's not being shut down. And I think that
Mhm.
that's ultimately an important thing. And I mean, we've seen government overreach with crypto and tech. I mean, they always try and slow shit down that they don't understand. I mean, I didn't like what happened in Canada with Justin Trudeau, and I don't know if you heard about this. There's the big truck convoy where they protested the mandates that were happening in Canada. And I don't really like, it's not even like the issue. It was what happened was people were sending crypto to support the cause, and the government intervened and shut that down, saying that, like, you if you support this, you're supporting terrorism type thing. And
Oh
it
wow.
wasn't, yeah, it was a bit of a reach. It was a bit of a reach because of, they didn't know how to handle the type of protest that it was. And I'm not even, again, not without even like taking a side on the issue. I just am a big believer in that they shouldn't be able to just like shut people's wallets down, and people should be able to spend their money. Like, I don't know. It's a little scary when the government starts getting into bank accounts and crypto.
Well, and are you saying that that's sort of that is what happened in this protest, that
Yeah,
uh, the government had denied access to people's wallets?
yeah. They pulled I'm pretty sure. I mean, we can look this up after or whatever, but it's like he the prime minister called into action it was almost like calling the protest like a terrorist act. So he had the right to overstep and intervene on any money that was coming into them, and that included crypto. So people couldn't support under the table.
Gotcha, gotcha. So then to kind of pivot that back to Metaverse, Decentraland, the idea
Mhm.
being you'll be able to support artists that you want to support. You'll be able to,
Hmm.
support causes that you want to support free of any restrictions that might happen outside of or in the real world as we know it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'm hoping that, yeah, obviously as these things, continue to manifest, and all these, really smart people are trying to evolve this type of stuff. I'm really hoping that there is, a safe way that people can support each other without fear of being canceled, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And
And oh, go ahead.
oh no, I just think that, like, if you're an artist and a comedian and you're putting out content, and maybe it's not good content, or maybe you're an asshole, and I think adults should be allowed to decide whether they think you're an asshole or not. And we vote with our dollar, and I don't think that it's up to a government to tell you, or a platform to tell you that this person is a bad person. It's on the individual. Like Alex Jones, yeah, guy's a fucking meathead.
Right.
But, like,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't.
yeah.
Should this guy, not be allowed to accept, credit card payments from his fans? Like, I don't know. Whether you agree with him or not, it is a free speech issue. I mean,
True. And sure, with Alex Jones in particular, there's recently in the news, there's the making up stuff, and then being found guilty of that. Like obviously that's a
that's a little different.
right, and that's another level of it's like if you're choosing to support that, well, then that kind of reflects back to you, the individual, who's it's a whole other.
Yeah.
But with I think art, it's a different type of beast in the sense that art inherently you're trying to, and comedy obviously is included in that. It's like it's expression. So
Hmm.
if you're aiming to entertain and you're aiming to uh at the end of the day help people, because you could argue that laughter's medicine, comedy's medicine, art essentially, if it's a reflection on society. Not to get too heady here, but
No, it's okay.
if you're going down that path, then art is inherently good. I think we're talking about some of the fringe elements here of just bigger picture
Hmm.
individuals, stuff like that that
There's
might not. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, yeah, people on the fringe, that it is a slippery slope, though. When you start punishing them, then you know if you punish this person, then it ends up being applied to the herd, and it's almost
Sure.
not. It's it's not always good when that happens. So, yeah, something that's just one thing that really bothered me in Canada, and I don't know if you have heard of this, but this would have been about, I think, 7 years ago. A comedian named Mike Ward, he did a joke about this. He's like a singer. He was a kid. I think he was like 14 or something, and he's in Quebec. He was the singer. He had like a facial disfigurement. Is a disease that he had, and Mike Ward made a joke about him, and then it kind of went viral or something. And then the kid's family sued him in a human rights tribunal, and it ended up going for years in court. Like, Mike Ward, like, finally won this court case after years of fighting it, and it was cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Like, I don't even know how much it cost. Like, it was like over 70 grand type thing. It was
Ooh.
Mike Ward fortunately had the money to fight this battle, because if it was me that got nailed with that, I wouldn't have been able to fight that. I would have been fucked. And so, like, I see these type of things happening, and I'm like, how do we protect, comedians who are just doing comedy? Even if, again, jokes can be in bad taste for sure, and ultimately that's up to, the comedian and the audience to interpret, but and choose whether they support or not. But I don't think that people should be punished for making a joke. I think Patrice O'Neill said it the best, is that all jokes are born from the same place, an attempt to be funny, and some of them live and some of them die.
Sure.
So
Yeah, well, and you bring up an interesting point too on just humor and different brands, and it's like I was talking to somebody the other day about just the Steve Martin model of being undeniable, and how if
Mhm.
something is funny in on that level, then it really doesn't matter if you agree with the humor or not, because you can't deny that whatever is being said is funny. So you may not be your cup of tea, but you still agree that, all right, hey, this is funny. It's not for me, but it's funny, and so
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's just sometimes punching down is funny because you're not supposed to punch down. Comedy's funny when you do something you're not supposed to do. It kind of is always bucking against the trend, no matter what that trend is. And it's the element of surprise. If everyone's being good and saying what you're supposed to say, when someone comes along and surprises you and says something you're not supposed to say, that's when it's funny. And it's just that's what people want to see. When you go to a comedy club, you basically are going into a place where everyone is subscribing to, you're going to hear some wild shit. And you're going to a nightclub. This is a place where you're supposed to hear things that you can't hear on TV, that you can't hear, in mainstream stuff. And that's what's exciting about it. There's an element of danger to comedy, and going back to the tension. Such a huge factor in why things are funny. And you you set it up and then you hit them with an element of surprise, and that gets the biggest payoff from my
do
experience anyway.
sure. And do you think that with Decentraland and Metaverse uh, opportunities becoming more prevalent for comedy, for comedians, that it's going to open up the just have people speaking more freely in terms of jokes, and not worrying so much about, as you mentioned, cancel culture and stuff like that?
I'm hoping so. I think having a platform that acts as a failsafe so that you can't get shut down will maybe create a little bit of less of a hesitancy from comedians to not worry about it. Like, if you're gonna get canceled here, you can always still be here, and there's still gonna be an audience. And that has to be, as things get bigger and more, users and more people start flocking to this tech. But the other thing that also exists is, and I don't really, this isn't really my style, but there are people that, you could go and do comedy as an avatar and no one knows who you are, and you could say some funny shit. You
Interesting.
could you could be anonymous. And again, that's not my bag. I'm fully doxxed, baby. Come and get me.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could go and, like, let's say, there are people. There's a cop up here, where he lives probably about 5 hours north of me, and he was doing comedy, and they're like, "Hey, you can't be doing this shit anymore if you want to keep your job." And he lost his job as a cop, but if he was doing it in the metaverse and going and performing as like an anonymous thing, he could do all this shit and
Vi-
get away with it all, and
It's
still keep his day job.
vigilante comedy. Yeah.
It's so funny. Yeah, I think also, I mean, going back to the Horizon Worlds one where it's more avatar based, and actually performing as an avatar. Um, you're seeing people who don't live in major cities get up and be able to perform. Like, when I did it, I'm like, okay, this is awesome because, yeah, I live 2 hours away. I can't go up on an open mic every night, but if there's open mics happening here, I would go up and do new material and work it out this way because it's just like being in a club. The sound is good. So the, these avenues are opening up, and as we explore it, it's going to only get better, which is so cool.
Yeah, and what's the main difference then in terms of performing as yourself and obviously being seen versus performing as your avatar? You're still being seen. You're
Hmm.
not fully you per se, but how does
Yeah.
that experience differ between both?
So there's the facial expressions. Obviously, the avatar's facial expressions are only limited to, it is what it is. I think the new Oculus gives you a little bit more realistic facial expressions. That's kind of uh, being improved upon. But like, if you're doing stand up and it's you and you tell a joke, and then you say your tagline, there's two laughs, and then you just look at the crowd with a funny look, there's your third punchline. And you don't have that. You don't get that extra factor in the metaverse with that, being able to just look. There's still also a lack of human connection. A human connection is very important in stand up. But if the jokes are good, you can connect to them still that way. It's just like, but it's like if you watch stand up on your TV and you're watching Netflix, I think you're less connected to watching it that way than you would be, in like a room with the avatars.
Well, true, because one is already pre-recorded
Mm-hmm.
and has happened, and now you're a participant in something that had already existed. Whereas even if you're watching an avatar, there's
Yes.
still a communal experience because you're part of that moment right then and there.
And if you're just watching something even pre-recorded on a screen, but there's a bunch of other avatars around, there's an interactivity to it. Or if
Right.
the performers in the room is an avatar and communicating through like the chat and all that, like there's just an extra level of engagement that the metaverse allows, and that we are excited to kind of develop and continue to create these new experiences. I just think that that's like the coolest part is people are going to be able to engage more with their fans, and fans
Mm.
vice versa with the comics.
Awesome. And on that tip, moving forward, fan engagement, technology, what can we expect in the next 6 months to year from you, Tyler, but also from Decentral Comedy, and what can people kind of be on lookout for?
Sure. So yeah, Decentral Comedy, we're going to be coming back in the new year with our mic drop festival again, brand new um like experience. There'll be a whole bunch of new shows. We just went down to Skankfest with a whole team, camera crew, and we recorded a whole behind the scenes of Skankfest thing to that we're going to be premiering in Decentraland as part of Mic Drop. And we're hoping that we have a lot of the comedians come in as their own avatars. We've been developing custom avatars with these comedians that are very realistic looking, and we can actually make the avatars look like the comics. They're not like the cartoony ones that you see in Decentraland right now. Like we're talking, they look exactly like them, and so it's going to be really really awesome for people to be able to go in and engage with the avatars of their favorite comics. And so we're going to be onboarding some new programming, some new podcasts. We were able to make a lot of good connections down there with some of the comedians, and just introduce this to them, because when we were down there, a lot of people, had never heard of this before. They didn't understand it, but they're very open to it, and it's really going to be great. So I'd say watch for what we're going to be doing there, and some new partnerships that they're going to be coming up with Decentral Comedy, and just kind of we're hoping to we're hoping to continue to onboard and bring new fans in to try out the experiences is really the key thing.
Do you think one day fans will be able to log into Decentraland or whatever metaverse platform they're, whatever sandbox they want to play in, and they could walk into a comedy club in the metaverse in the same way that you could in the real world, on a Tuesday night, you walk up to the Improv, you could also log in and walk over to or navigate to the Decentraland Comedy Club and see who's performing. Do you think
I think
that's
so. I think that that's where it's heading. I think that that's where, the more people that we can educate on this and kind of bring their content into it and get them prepared for where the tech is going. Once there's multiple comedians that are subscribing to what this is, it's going to create more of an influx in that, and that's where those opportunities will come. But yeah, we're building out all of this. We want to be the one-stop shop for all things comedy in the metaverse. So anyone that's looking to, bring their content and bring, their own experiences for their fans, that's, we're happy to help set them up and get them ready to go, because that's where this is heading. And you know, even in a bear market, that's when people are building the wildest stuff. So there's amazing new things around the corner that I haven't even thought of. I
Sure,
can't wait.
sure. And on that tip, then you mentioned comedy specials. Do you think that's also something on the horizon where people are going to start? I know you mentioned you yourself had done one
Mhm.
before, but where all of a sudden now there's an just as the Netflix bubble on specials had occurred, perhaps there's an upcoming, you know, metaverse launch of specials on the horizon as well.
Absolutely, and we've already been doing it with some of the artists that we produce. But as we start introducing this to some of the bigger name acts, and they start realizing that this is an avenue for them, I think that they're gonna jump on it too, and I think we'll start to see more and more people. Because again, if you're just putting out your special for free on YouTube, there's no reason why you shouldn't do a VIP experience in the Decentraland with Decentral Comedy, and we make it a ticketed event for your fans, and we create an avatar for you, and you can come in and engage with them, and you know basically throw a virtual party for your fans to come and watch a screening of your special. That's absolutely something that we're already doing, and we hope to be able to do for some of the big boys as they start to adopt this tech.
Got you. So in many ways, it's like a premiere for your you could throw a premiere for your special in
Yes.
the metaverse, and while it might live exclusively, say in this example on YouTube,
Yep.
you're pushing people in that direction with the digital party, you're saying virtual party, through Decentral Comedy.
That's correct. That's correct. And even with podcasts, they can do this. So if they have a Patreon and they have a top tier, well, guess what? Top tier Patreon, you're getting an NFT that gives you access to the podcast space. And every week, we're going to be screening the podcast, and you can get first view in the metaverse. Like, these are things that comedians have the opportunity to start implementing into their programming for their fans, and I think it's something that they're going to be interested in as they, want to get ahead of. Everyone wants to get ahead of someone else.
Sure. Totally. Well, again, hopefully the innovation will continue to propel more and different people to move the space forward, and all with the decentralized mindset of helping create the best product possible. So looking forward to seeing what Decentral Comedy comes forward with in the next couple months and years. And yeah, really appreciate Tyler, you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always great to chat about this stuff. I mean, most of the people I know don't know shit. So I live in a small town. They look at me like I'm insane. It's like when you talk about the metaverse to people in a small town, they're looking at you like a cokehead trying to do a business deal.
Like, what's this guy talking about?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then we're gonna get the crypto set up that you can tip them in.
I'm just gonna stick to HBO and Netflix and call it a day. And you're like,
You
but there's
come
a
in as a
whole
dragon?
yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
So am I going to be me? I don't want to come into the special with somebody else.
Yeah. So, but no, it is cool, man, and I think again, going back to me being in a small town and just bridging the gap for from my distance, that this has been an easier thing to pivot into because I'm open to those things, and hopefully it creates opportunities for other people who live in smaller towns to to do these exciting things that are not necessarily you don't have to be in a big city to do it. You know what I mean? You don't have to be tethered
Totally,
to that.
totally, and I think to your point too, you just have to have some knowledge in this case of whatever vertical you're in this case comedy, and in this case producing. You're just taking your skill set and your experience and success as a producer of comedy, and moving it toward a different medium, but it's still the same. You're still putting on a show, you know
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
so it'll be hopefully people can, as you were saying, use this as an example to uh create content in similar ways in whatever, whether it's music or any other genre. Um, but hopefully too, we can see more shows like this,
Hmm.
or more types of shows, using the example that you guys have pioneered in many ways.
Yeah, and anyone that's looking to try this out, especially when we get when mic drop's coming back, but anytime you wanted to even jump in and test out Decentraland, if you go on decentralcomedy.io, we have the steps clearly laid out on how you can onboard into the metaverse and jump in, and you can jump right into Decentraland and try it out. It shows you how to set up a wallet. It shows you how to get in there, and that's a big part, is just teaching people how to get started. I think is the one barrier of access, and we want to make sure that it's as simple as possible. But if you go to our site, we have it all set up for people to try out.
Love it. Tyler Morrison, comedian and founder of Decentral Comedy. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me.